Hey team, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to write tic-tac-toe. We're going to use Python and TKInter to do this. Are you ready? Let's do it. Head over to github.com, softwareNuggets, see the package Python TKInter tic-tac-toe. Go ahead and click on that. Then you'll see Tic-Tac-Toe Pro, click that. Here's the source code. You see this little button over here that says copy raw contents? Click that. Guess what? The source code for this video is now in your clipboard. The only thing we have to do now is come back to Visual Code or your favorite editor, paste it in, and we can start talking about this. Let's do that. Before we dive into the source code, let's look at the app, all the features. Okay, so I can say new game or press restart. I can also reset the scoreboard. Notice right now it's 1 to 1. I can come up here and say reset scoreboard. And then an about. Now, of course, all the source code is there, so you can learn how to do all these things. And I can play against myself, which makes it really, really hard, okay? And then, wow, if you're not on top of your game, this guy will beat you pretty fast, yeah? So, play one more game, and, oh, he got me. Here is the source code, tic-tac-toe-pro.py. You can get that up on my GitHub. Just follow this address right here, and I'll get it for you. Line 3, import the standard library TKInter. Make an alias. Let's use the abbreviation TK. Line 4, import the standard library random. And then from pillow, import image and image TK. Now it's possible you don't have this installed on your computer, so how to install it? Well, open up a command prompt and say pip install pillow. And then you'll be able to use the image and image TK functions. Okay, so we're using a class object for this project for tic-tac-toe. And at the very bottom of the app, notice on line 370, I say if _name equals _main. That's where it all begins. Now, what does this mean? Well, in Python, this expression is used to check if a Python file is being run as the main program, or if it's being imported as a module into another program. So that's what this is all about. Then you can see here we're declaring a global variable called default font name. And notice I'm assigning Helvetica to this variable name. Then on lines 373 to 375, notice we have two tuples. Now notice 0, 1, 2, and 3. These are the index positions of this tuple. Index sub 0 is the display character. So when you're using this game, player X will get this character in the boxes. Player O will get an O. And the player turn, you'll notice that this label will be displayed when player X is using it. His background will be sky blue, and if they win, they get player X as winner. Now this player, player O, background is light green, and player O is the winner. On 377, notice we say root equals tk.tk. Now, what does that mean? In Python with TKInter, the statement root equals tk.tk creates a main window or a root window for the GUI application. That's all it does. And then we're going to be sending in that root to the class object tic-tac-toe. On line 379, notice root.MainLoop. Now, this method is called to start the event loop, allowing the GUI application to respond to user input and events until the main window is closed. Let's begin with class tic-tac-toe. Notice it says def, define function, init. Now, init method is commonly referred to as a constructor or an initialization method. Now, this is a special method that is called automatically when this class is instantiated. Now, what does that mean? So down at the bottom, remember when we did this command? And here I'm instantiating this class. So instantiating this class calls this method. Now, we come down here and we say that class object that was sent in, I'm going to assign it to self master. And then the title, tic-tac-toe. If you look over here, you can see the title of this window is tic-tac-toe. And the geometry is a 280 by 420. So that means left to right it's 280 pixels, and top to bottom, you see that it is 420 pixels. On line 17, notice we say self dot play against computer var equals tk.IntVar. Now what does that mean? Well, all this does is it creates an instance of a TKInter variable that can store integer values that can be associated with a widget like this checkbox here. On line 18, I'm just going to set current play computer to be player X. If they click this checkbox, then player X will be our first player. 20, game over, false. Then we're going to random pick a player. Let's go take a look at that. So right away you see if random.ranInt 13 to 143 mod 2. So this is going to return us odd or even, 0 or 1. Now if it's even, 0, then we're going to have player X. If it's odd, then we're going to use player O. Now why did I use these ranges? Some might use 0, 1. But it seemed like when I used this little scale, then I would get the same player playing more frequently. When I used a bigger range, it seemed like, like it would be more evened out. On 29, attach scorecard. Scorecard is this top section of the application where you see a player and its score. And the highlighted sky blue, that is the action that needs to happen. So player X's turn right now. Let's go take a look at attach scorecard. So you can see right away on line 66, we're creating a frame, row configure, 2 rows for that. Then we put a my win label. Notice that says player X, and then it will have its current value. And then we are going to use the grid layout to put that at row 0. And then right next to it, we're going to put player O. We're also going to give it a default value of 0. But this is just a string. And then we're going to put that in column 2. So the first one was in column 0. The win theirs is in column 2. Next, that status bar where it says player X turn. Well, notice that goes on row 1, column 0. We're going to use a column span of 4. Sticky, that just means I want it to go from left to right, top to bottom. So north, east, west, south. That's what that means. And that's attach scorecard. On line 32, show current user on scorecard. Let's take a look at that. Right click, go to definition. If the current player equals player X sub 0, remember this is a tuple, sub 0 is the letter. So if current player equals X, then what we're going to do is on that status bar, right here where it says player X turn, then I'm going to actually show that message player X turn, and the background is going to be that light sky blue. Now if it is not player X, it's not X, it's O, then I'm going to put player O sub 1 there, and I'm going to turn that background color to that light green. And that's show current user on scorecard. On line 35, reset win losses. I think we looked at this earlier. I'm just going to set my win count, their win count, and I'm going to update the scoreboard. On line 38, self.setupBoard. Definition. Line 94. Okay, so this is a more complicated one, but we'll get through it. So the first thing I do is I create a frame. Notice over here, you can see a frame going around these 9 buttons. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make that on row 2. Remember, the whole top panel was 2 rows. So it starts at 0, 0, 1, and then this would be 2. Then I'm going to declare a variable of board. Notice that this is a 3x3, and each of the values is an empty string. Then on line 107, I'm actually going to create another object that is a 3x3, but its values are none. So notice empty string and none. Let's see how I use that. So here you can see I'm doing a for I loop, a for j loop, 3x3, and then I'm going to build a button on line 112. Now that button then gets assigned to buttons. Notice on line 118, button sub ij, I'm going to put a button control into this list. Now the thing of interest here is on line 114, where we say command equals lambda I equals I, j equals j, and then self play I comma j. Okay, let me explain that. So we're building buttons, and these buttons will be rendered from this list. Now, when it says self play I comma j, when I'm actually at this button, I actually don't know what I and j is. And we just can't come back here and say command self play ij. It doesn't work like that. What we have to do is we have to use this lambda expression, and what it's going to do is it's going to create a variable inside of this object called I and j. We could have called it whatever we wanted, and I'm going to put the values I and j into those two variables. And then when I go to execute this button click, the self play, I'm actually going to come over here and grab these values from these variables, and that's what I'm going to put in these placeholders. That's all that means. So I'm going to stay inside of this loop. Notice row I, column j, for all 9, and guess what? That finishes up setup board. I should mention one other thing. The board is a variable and allows me to place a value in here like a X or an O and see what happens. And then I can roll it back. Like say I want to say if I put an X here, will I win? And then if I run it through the test to see if I would win, and it said no, you wouldn't win there. And then I may go, like through every one of these and put it there to see if I would win. But I don't put those on the screen. The screen is in buttons. I don't want a user to see that I'm, like running all these background processes. So we just run them like behind the scenes in this one called board. Now let's look at line 41, setup bottom section. If you look at the app, it's down there with that restart and that checkbox. Here you can see we have a restart button. It's just your basic button. On the command, we're going to call the method start. We'll look at that in just a moment. And then we have our checkbox. Now our checkbox uses that variable parameter. Remember that variable parameter went and used that variable we declared at the very beginning, play against computer var. So when a user, clicks on this command using toggle computer, I know about how to get data out of that control and how to assign data through that with the get and set functions. Let's just take a look at the function called toggle computer. You just saw from line 128 where the checkbox has its command toggle computer on line 178. So the first thing I do is I reset buttons. Reset buttons is on 137. Notice I have two loops. I got an I loop, I got a J loop, and for every IJ, I'm going to set the text on the button to empty string, and in that behind the scenes variable self board, I'm going to set that to also empty string. That resets it. Then when I get back, what I'm going to do is, look here, I'm going to use that get function on that IntVar. Remember I told you it was a special type of object? And I'm going to assign that to want to play computer. Now when I get that value back, I'm then going to pick a random player. I think we looked at this once before. And you remember when I used the 13143, I explained why I used this. Mod it by 2. Gets it down to does odd and even. If it is even, I will be using player X. If it is 1, I will be using player O. The current player was randomly selected. If the current player equals X, that's player X sub 0. Now if that equals that, I'm going to change that status label to be the player X. If it's not player X, an X character here, then we're going to go for the other player, player O, or the computer. As we get down to line 191, the checkbox has been selected. We randomize the player. We have shown the current player on the scorecard. Now it's time for the play computer to happen. We're on the last line of toggle computer. The user has selected this play against computer button. Now on line 191, play computer, it's saying go execute this function down here called play computer. Now, before we actually get in here, there are two lines that may be difficult to understand. So what I've decided to do is to come up to play and kind of put in all that code simplified. So notice here it says self.board sub0. Well, down here inside of here, notice is self subboard sub I. So instead of me going from 0, 1, and 2, I'm just going to show you what the first instance is. And then after I teach you that upstairs, this right here will be very, very simple to understand. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint on line 257, and we're going to step through this and see what happens. Are you ready? So notice over here on the board, I have player X's turn. Now X comes in and puts an X right here at 0, 0. Notice that's board sub 0. So let's look at AA. AA is just a dummy variable. Notice that you see in AA, what do you see for that row? You see X and then empty, empty. So notice that when you don't say IJ, row column, if you just say one variable, that will give you the row. And this is saying on row AA, we have an X, empty, empty. Then for line 253, I'm saying, okay, let's do B. B equals row 0, count the number of X's that you see there. So let's go look at A again. And how many X's do you see in this line? Well, you see 1. So look at the value for BB. Come on. BB is 1. Now my next variable, T or F, true or false. Now, does that board row sub 0 count the number of X's that you see? Now, if you see 2, this expression evaluates to true. Now, if count, like we see here, only has 1, it would be like, does 1 equal 2? And that would return false. Let's see what we see here. Well, it equals false. Now, the last expression we need to understand is this last one on 255. I'm saying, look at the first expression. That's the same one as this guy right here. And I'm like, count the X's. Does that equal 2? Now, that equals false. And then we're saying and. Well, for this ever to be true on an and condition, both sides have to be true. So we don't even need to evaluate this. So this one will also be false. Okay? So let's continue. So now I'm going to pick one for O. O is going to be down here on the next row. And I'm just going to hit the go button. Now I'm going to come back up here to this first one and put another X here. Now look at A again. A has got 2 X's. So what would you consider BB to have now? It's getting the count. Remember, count is an aggregate function. All that means is it counts whatever value that you put in here. So here I'm saying, oh, look at that, is 2 now. Now, self.board sub 0, that first row, count me the X's. Does that equal 2? Well, that should be true now. Now I'm going to say, hey, what does that board count equal? 2. 2 equal 2? Okay, that's true. So I can actually do this and now. Is there a space in that row sub 0? Yes. So what do you think the value for test is? Well, that should be true. There you go. Now, if you don't understand this, down there in the play computer, just keep coming up here, stepping through this code, and maybe you might want to do, like a 1, 2, and 3 down here. Have test AA2 for row 2, AA3 for row 3, and you'll get it sooner or later, but that's the gist of it. Let's now put comments on this and rerun this so we can look at the play computer. Let's continue where we left off before we gave the lesson. Remember, we were on toggle computer. You can see here, play against computer. Let's turn that on. Notice I have a breakpoint on 191. Play computer. Let's hit F11. Now the first test we'll do is the current player, notice it's O, is it player O? And the answer is true. So we're going to pass that return. Now we're going to be looking at board 1, 1. That's right here in the center. And we're saying, is that empty? And it is empty. So what we're going to do is we are going to put an O there. I'm going to check to see if I've won. I'm going to check to see if it's a draw. And then I'm going to switch players. Now I'm going to turn it over to player X. And I'm going to return. So now notice the status bar has been updated. It's telling me, hey, player X, it's your turn. Now let's go look at play. So play is going to come in there and I'm going to say, hey, is the game over? And then I'm going to go look at, notice I'm sending an IJ. So IJ, we learned, comes from the button click. We also can remember that was the lambda expression that helped us get I and J value. So here you can see that I'm going to put the current player, that's the X or O, into board. Remember, board is a memory variable. And then I'm going to take that same value and I'm going to put it into the button. So let's go ahead and let's continue into here. I'm going to block him at 0, 0. So the lambda expression's firing, F10. Now I'm into play. Look at I and J. So we got 0 and 0. That's exactly what we expected. And then we're going to set the current player in that board. Let's go ahead and look at board. So notice we have the X, that's what I just played. And then the computer played 0, 1, 1. You can see that here. This is what I just played. Okay. Then I'm going to check to see if I won. And you know better than that. So let's go ahead and step over this. And then I'm going to check for a draw. I'm going to swap players. I'm going to show the updated scorecard. And then I'm going to see if this button right here is still set. And notice I'm going to be using the get function. And is the current player, player O. Well, you just want me to swap it here on 275. F10. F11 steps in there. And then I'm making sure that player O is the current player here. Remember, play computer is only for player O. Now the first test I do is I make sure is 1, 1, is that empty? No, I've already claimed that. That's got the value O in there. So F10. Now we're down to the next thing. In the lesson, I taught you about what this means. And you now understand that. So I'm going to go for board. Notice I've got 1 X in there. So get the count of X. X is 1. Does 1 equal 2? No, this fails. So this whole for this I is no good. I'll meet you down on 325. So no good, no good, no good. Okay, now we're on the next one. Now notice I got an I and a J. And for each I and J, I'm going to use the board. Remember, the board is a background memory variable and allows me to kind of do what ifs. Then I'm going to be putting the O in certain positions and I'm going to see if I win. Now, if I win via that check, because remember, check is actually using board, then I'm going to fill in that button. The game is over. I increment their count. I update the status board, and then I just change the status. Now, if I don't win it, notice I say board sub IJ, the same one I used here. I'm going to set it back to empty. And I'm going to do that for every IJ position. I'll meet you on line 338. See how it just keeps resetting? No wins. Well, no wins yet. He's going to beat me. And we're almost done here. Okay, so nothing happened inside of here. Now notice what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to see how I need to block him. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be inserting an X into the board and then checking to see if that wins. Now, if it does win, whatever position I was going to put an X in, I'm going to put an O there. I'm going to prevent him from winning. That's what this 338 test does. And after this, I will meet you on line 350. And you just see what it does. I just keep putting an X in there. I check to see if it wins, and then I reset that memory variable. And just keep stepping your way through there. I'm going to hit continue, and I'll meet you on line 350. So now in 350, what we're going to do is I'm going to randomize I, I'm going to randomize J, and then I'm going to go out to that IJ position. If it's empty, I'm going to put a letter there. Now you see that this is random. So it is possible that I hit 1, 1, and we see 1, 1 here already has an O, so it's not going to do anything. So once I get inside of an empty spot, then I can put the letter O somewhere. I'm going to check it for a win, I'm going to check it for a draw, and then I'm going to switch users and then return if I can't find any. So let's go ahead and continue. So that's that, and then F10 to continue, and notice I'm back. So now it is the player X, that's me. Now where am I going to go? Well, I don't want to drag this out too long. I'm going to let him beat me. So notice I'm going to click here, and then he's going to find out that he's got to win here, and he's going to win the game. So I'll hit X, just run this, and guess what? He won. And there you have it, team. Tic-Tac-Toe, a Python and TKInter solution. I hope you were able to learn a thing or two. And if you have any questions about this video or just any comments in general, please leave them below. I hope you enjoyed this video and looking forward to my next video. Until then, take care.